Okay, right.
Okay. So do you have any questions for me?
I don't think so, no.
Are you up? Are you in England?
Yes, I am. I am in England.
What time is it?
It's 8 o'clock
Wow.
PM. Yeah.
So it's just about 3 here. So yeah. Are you familiar with where we are in Florida?
No, no. And I've never
Where?
been to Florida either.
Oh,
So,
really?
mm.
Wow. Maybe we'll have to get you as part of our community reads or something.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd love a trip
Yeah.
to Florida. How's the weather there at the moment? Is it nice? It's horrible here, so I'm asking out of envy.
Oh, okay. So it's hot. It's in like the 90s.
Wow.
Yeah, usually in Florida, the summers are pretty hot, but once October rolls around, like October to I want to say May, it's like low 80s and breezy every day. I really
Well,
can't
that's
complain.
a lot better than even summer here. So,
Yeah. So we just get the hurricanes. That's really the big thing.
yeah. Yes, I can't imagine.
So I've never been to England, but I'd like to go. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's we're having a pretty bad summer at the moment. Just rain every day. Just rain and like not even t-shirt weather, like still jumper weather.
yeah, that's cool. So 2, 4. Let's see. Okay. So I'll just remind everyone to mute. And then I'll probably start off, asking you to just introduce yourself.
Okay, cool.
So let's see. So in the book, it says that you live in Birmingham.
Yeah, I actually now live in Worcestershire, which is about an hour from there. So we moved slightly more rural.
Okay,
But yeah, I'm from Birmingham originally.
cool. I through the ancestry database, I found that I actually have some English ancestry, and they're based out of Wiltshire.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
not very far from here. How interesting.
yeah,
Do you think, can you trace them?
yeah. So their last name is Burroughs, and well, they came to America in like the early 1800s.
Wow,
So it was
that's
like my
amazing.
great 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 grandfather, so or something like that came over.
Yeah. Oh, wow. What made you look at ancestry? Are you into that?
Well, I some people know exactly what their ancestry is, and I consider myself a mutt because I'm just so many different things, and I think a lot of people in America are like that. So
Mm,
I just wanted to know what my genetic breakdown was, and
yeah,
yeah, it was like a good chunk. It was like 15 to 20% was English.
that's interesting.
Yeah. So
What was the rest?
like Spanish, Italian, there was some Danish in there.
Yeah. How interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. How nice to know. I have no idea about mine.
No. So has your family been in the Birmingham area for a long time?
Yeah, I think at least a few generations. Yeah. I think my surname is Irish, or Scottish, I'm not sure. So possibly there's that a few generations up.
Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, one of these days I'd like to go to England,
Yeah,
see some of the castles or Stonehenge. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know what the fun things are to do there. So
yeah. There's quite like London is like nowhere else really. There's so much to do there. It's quite like New York.
mhm.
It's just you could just entertain yourself for weeks in London.
Yeah.
And yeah, I have been to Stonehenge, and you can't get very near anymore. It's fenced off, which is a
Oh,
bit
wow.
annoying. So
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So I went there and I was like, oh, we're like half a mile away.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so much like really old stuff. Like you can go and see the house that Shakespeare lived in. That's quite near here, which is really cool.
Hmm.
If you're an English kind of nerd, if you're a
Yeah.
writer nerd like I am.
Yeah. I always have discussions with friends about Shakespeare and if he was like a company under one name or if
That's
he was one
interesting.
person. I don't know. Is that like a big thing in England? People talk about that?
A little bit, like they talk about whether Christopher Marlowe was the brains behind it, a little bit,
Okay.
I think. Yeah, and like there is some people do think Shakespeare plagiarized some things. But yeah, how interesting to think he might be more than one person. That's such a good twist.
It is a good twist. That's funny. So yeah, and like in your book, I mean the time loop. I don't know if there's a specific name for it, but yeah, we're going to talk about that a lot because it's just so interesting. And a lot of people are wondering how you developed that as you wrote.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not sure I know how, but I'm trying to do it for a new book at the moment, and I'm like, how do I do this? Like, what is the process? I don't even know.
Really? Oh,
Oh yeah,
I hear a lot of writers say that they don't have like a specific process. It's almost like it comes to them and they write it out almost.
yeah, that is
And
pretty
then
much you sort of wait with an open mind, I think, and then you develop the things that you feel interested in. But you kind of have to wait for them to come, I think.
okay. All right, so it looks like Trin is going to admit everyone into the session. So we'll get
Okay.
started once they're in. Okay, it's 3 o'clock and we have the recording on. Okay, great. So welcome everyone to Conversations with Authors. My name is Robby Camastro. I'm a librarian at the main library in St. Augustine. And today I have the honor and privilege to introduce Gillian McAllister, who is the author of Wrong Place, Wrong Time. And I have the book here, such a beautiful cover. So it was a very fun discussion that we had at our last week book talk on it. So I just want to remind everyone to mute themselves while we're chatting. And then the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to have Gillian introduce herself, and then I'm going to come up with the questions that we came up with as a group, and then I'm going to open the questioning to the members here, and they can put their questions in the chat, and I will go ahead and read it for everyone. So thank you again, Gillian, for being here. I just want to thank the friends of the Point of Vedra Beach Branch Library and all the members of the Book Lovers Book Club who attended last week's book discussion. I had a great time. This book is one of the best novels I've read in a long time. So really, this is a big privilege, and I'm honored for being here. So without further ado, I introduce Gillian McAllister. Welcome. And can you please introduce yourself to the group?
Yeah, hi, and thanks for the intro. Thanks for having me. I'm Gillian McAllister. I am the Sunday Times and New York Times bestselling author of over here 7 novels. In America, 3 novels, which is slightly confusing. And I live in Worcestershire, which is in the very middle of England. I used to be a lawyer, and I now live here and write full time.
That's wonderful. So, and you were in Birmingham and you moved to Worcestershire.
That's right.
So do you find the Worcestershire more rural lifestyle more appealing, especially when you're writing and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah, I always wanted to live quite rurally, and yeah, it's just me and the dog a lot of the time. husband and a baby some of the time. So yeah, it's nice to walk and to think, which, you know, you have to do quite a lot as a writer.
Yeah. So I want to start with the questions from the group. And the first question right off the bat is the book autobiographical? Or,
No, I'm not caught in a time loop, luckily. No, it's not at all. I think writers tend to get that out of their system quite early on. I suppose the character of Jen, she is a lawyer, as I was. She's the first time in, you know, 7 novels that I ever wrote a lawyer. But she's not really like me, no. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad it's not autobiographical because it's fairly harrowing what happens to her.
yeah. Yeah, and especially her friend Pauline.
Exactly.
And that was something was with the whole time loop, you know, was it something that swaps between them, or was Pauline going to be stuck in it as well? So another question was, do you have any children?
Yes, I do now. I didn't when I wrote it. But I had a baby in October, so very recently, actually. So I wrote it just before I got pregnant. So yeah, I was childless when I wrote it, but now I have a son actually who was born on day 0, the day the novel opens. So that's pretty
Wow,
weird. Yeah.
it is like being in a time loop a little bit.
Yeah, I know. I did want to call him Todd, but I wasn't allowed to name him
Yeah.
after a character in my novel.
Yeah. Oh, what's that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So early on in the book, there's this scene when after Jen witnesses the murder, I think she walks downstairs and she touches a doorknob, and there's this deja vu moment that she has. And we were all wondering if there was any significance behind the deja vu moment, or if there's any significance behind the doorknob.
No, only that. So in the very end of the book, when I talk about hysterical strength, that is born out of the kind of folklore that you hear about women who, you know, if their baby is trapped in the car, they're suddenly able to lift the car. And for me, I thought as she put her hand on the door, that was the moment she was going to go and rescue her son from the situation that he had got himself into. And so that created something with a force so high as to create the time loop. And the deja vu was my explanation. Sometimes when you experience deja vu, you don't know why. And maybe it's because you've just been in a time loop and you didn't know it and you've come back to yourself, which is why it ends with the deja vu as well. I was just using a kind of phenomenon that we don't really understand in my book. So that is the significance of that.
Okay. So as far as your writing process, did you start writing the novel in a chronological order? Did things change as you wrote the book? Because with all these different time loops and things happening, how are you able to plan that out as you wrote?
I did do a plan, yeah. Because to me, it was actually quite a linear mystery, although, you know, she's experiencing, you know, the 29th of October and then the 28th, etc. She does find out clues in a logical order. So the plan really was, what is she going to find out on the first day and then the second day and then the third day? And then I had to link that into what was she supposed to be doing on those days, because she didn't always relive, you know, the Monday. She would maybe follow her husband rather than go to work, for example. So I worked out how she discovered what had happened, and then I did do a separate timeline, which was what had actually happened going forwards originally, and they kind of informed each other, and I had 2 timelines up in my house at all times while I was writing it.
Wow. So how long did it take you to write?
About a year, you know, alongside editing another book, because I usually start a book around now, and then I get edits August and September. So I usually sort of do them both concurrently. But yeah, it's sort of about 10 to 12 months on average for me to write a book, from, you know, first word on the page to delivery to my publishers.
Yeah. That's so. Did the plot, did it develop through the characters, or did you have did you have the idea of the plot and then sort of put the characters in there? How did that unfold?
Yeah, for me, I actually, although I'm sort of known for writing character-led fiction, I do sort the plot first. So I wrote down what had happened and what was going to happen. And then I look at it and I thought, well, you know, the character of Jen has to be pretty tenacious, like, so that is a trait of hers. And her husband has to be fairly secretive. And so the characters actually come quite late to me, because first of all, I have to know what I need the characters to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
So
it's not how most writers do it, I don't think. That I'm quite unusual in that, I think.
so you don't really know your characters right away, like before you start
Correct.
the writing process. You kind of learn who your characters are as you're writing, as the writing.
Yeah, and so in the first draft, they're just wooden puppets. They don't have any traits, and I don't really try to give them any either. I sort of layer up the characters in subsequent drafts.
Okay, that's really awesome. It's impressive that the characters come last, because you get to know them, and you get to know Jen, and you know just how she just wants to solve this, and just keeps waking up a day in the past, just another day, another day, another day. And it's just like you get to learn about her personality and how much she loves her son. And we talked a lot about mother's intuition. If there's any sort of underlying message or metaphor between like a mother and knowing the secrets that their child has done in the past, or sort of like a mother knows best type of thing, if there was any sort of element to that you put into Jen, as you were unfolding this character into your writing.
Yeah, I think there is some of that, because she is more adamant than anybody that he would never do this.
Mm-hmm.
And even though he's been like secretive and slightly moody, she really knew him to be good, more than anyone else did, I think. So yeah, I think there is that. And you know, as a mum, she does doubt herself, which I found that to be an interesting trait, because she's not really secure in that knowledge. She sort of thinks, oh, but there must be something I don't know, or perhaps I've done something wrong. And I think that's possibly fundamental to a lot of the relationship that a mother has with her children. You know, you want to believe that you know them best, but you also doubt if you really do. And, you know, you doubt the way that you've parented them, I think, a lot of the time.
Yeah. And with her husband, Kelly, were you shocked that he was lying to her the whole time?
Oh no, I planned that
You
from
planned that one?
scene
Okay.
one. Yeah, I could never write a twist without a plan, really. I'm not smart enough to do that.
Yeah. Because I think all of us were shocked, and it just brought a great discussion, especially on, you know, your relationship between husband and wife, and keeping secrets, and but also being there for somebody. So as I'm looking at this list, I'm also looking at things about you specifically. So you said that you were a lawyer before becoming a writer full time. What kind of law did you practice?
I did real estate law, but commercial, so like investment real estate specifically, so not crime. A lot of people think it was crime, but it wasn't.
What? So did you find that Was writing always your passion growing up? And
Oh, definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. From if you asked me at any age what I wanted to be, it would have been a writer, even age 5. Um, but I did find law school quite helpful for storytelling. All the cases you have to learn about are all individual stories, and I found that very interesting. And I found the sort of discipline of it quite useful. Like, I'm quite structured in the way that I work and able to meet deadlines and all of that. And I think able to deal with like a large volume of information and, deal with it logically. Wrong Place, Wrong Time was a book that you really had to sort of wrangle. And I think, having been a lawyer who drafted really long documents, I do think that helped me in some ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the plan out, especially something like a manuscript, and to meet deadlines. So I guess with the whole time loop, was there any sort of influence to that? Or was that just an original idea you had for the novel? Did you read something? Like, what influenced you to write a story like this?
Well, I think it probably came from watching Russian Doll on Netflix. And after I watched that, I sort of thought, why has nobody done a kind of Groundhog Day, but in crime fiction? Like, I couldn't name one. And then so I had that idea probably a year before I actually had the idea. And I was sort of mulling it over, and I was thinking, it's difficult because it can be quite boring to repeat the day for the reader. And, in movies, you can kind of montage the differences in the days or the similarities. And then I sat down to watch the news, and there was this segment on knife crime. And I just suddenly thought about seeing somebody you love commit a crime and not waking up the day of the crime, but the day before it. It just came to me out of nowhere, really, and kind of changed my life in the process. And then I was off, and I just thought, I can't believe nobody's ever done this before. Like, going back day by day, like, it made perfect sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seemed like an original idea for me, because I've never read a book that it just the next day they kept going back and back and back. It's always like you go one point back in time, or it's not like this repetitive cycle that you're in and you have to get out. But for the time loop, was it, I mean, even for you, do you know what it was, or is there some sort of reason for it, or is it just part of the story? Like, that's just
Yeah,
made it.
so for me, it is that Jen is so distressed by witnessing what happened that she created the time loop by using a force that was so strong that she willed it not to happen. So rather than lifting a car up, she wished so fervently that it hadn't happened to her son that she created the time loop that she then got stuck in. That is my explanation,
That
albeit
is,
extremely unscientific.
no, but it's an amazing idea, because we do hear these stories of people who can lift a car, out of nowhere. If someone's trapped underneath, there's always these somewhat like miraculous situations. So and that didn't seem, and I'm trying to recall the book discussion. I don't seem to recall anybody saying that it was sort of something like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's
So
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the little bit about hysterical strength at the back is sort of a nod to that, really.
Mm-hmm. And did you find, was this the idea for this novel? Was this something you kind of mulled around in your head for a long time? Or is
Yeah,
it?
I did have the idea quite early on. Like, often I have the idea 5 minutes before I need it, but this one I was really knee deep in writing a book before it. And so yeah, I had the idea in the November, and I didn't really need to start writing it until August. So I had a whole year actually to mull it over, which I think did help.
Okay. So those were all the questions that the group came up with. So I guess I'm at that point where I'm willing to take questions from the group if people wanted to put them in the chat. I can go ahead and ask them on behalf of the group. So please put in your questions. And we'll just we'll wait a second to see if it's there. We got one question from Christopher. Who are your favorite authors, British and otherwise?
I will read anything Lisa Jewell writes, usually. I like Ruth Ware a lot. I like a British author called Louise Doughty, who wrote a book called Apple Tree Yard, which was big over here. I don't know, it was adapted for TV actually over here. I don't know if anybody's heard of her, but I liked that. And I like an author called Susie Steiner, who wrote police procedurals, but they had a great central detective character.
Thank you. Jane asked, please tell us more about your lifestyle and writing schedule.
Well, it's slightly different now. I've just had a baby, so it's a bit sort of all over the place still, but I start a first draft in usually August or September, and I now try to write 10,000 words a week, because I have funny childcare, so some days are like bigger days, and it used to be 2,000 words a day, but some days I don't do any, and I usually do that in about 8 weeks, around other edits, and then I then do like a big rewrite usually, or a big structural edit, sort of December, January, February, March time, and then I do a kind of prose and character edit before I deliver. But really I work like probably 4 hours a day every day. I do tend to work 7 days a week, but not all long hours. And yeah, I like to touch the manuscript every day of the week, really, even if it's just half an hour. So yeah, that's sort of how I do it. As I say, it's a bit all over the place at the moment because I'm finding my feet, really. But yeah, I used to just be able to do 2,000 words 7 days a week, and that was what I did.
Do you write at a specific time in the day?
Yeah, I write in working hours, really, and I always have, actually. I used to do 1,000 words and then have my lunch, and then 1,000 words and have my dinner, but it's a little bit different now. I sort of work 9 till 3-ish, because that's when I have childcare. So yeah, I do that. But I mean, I often am in the bath in the evening and I'll have an idea for my next book. Like, I'm always thinking about it, and I'm sort of never not working in many ways.
Okay. I have a question from Jamie. What is your favorite book that you've written and why?
It's probably the book that I delivered last week, actually. So I have this book which is coming out next week. So this one is all done. There's the front. So that is out next week in America, called Just Another Missing Person. And the book that I've just delivered doesn't yet have a title, but it's about a siege. And it was really interesting and fun for me to write.
Thank you. Christy asks, what was the process of transitioning to a full-time author like for you?
Yeah, well, I got my deal in 2016, and I stayed as a full-time lawyer. And then my book came out in 2017 here, and it became a bestseller. And I went part-time at that point, even though I was pretty scared to. But by that point, I had promotion to do, as well as writing, as well as edits. I was on a book a year, and I really actually couldn't keep up. So I went to 3 days a week, and then I left it 2 more bestsellers before I just quit, which, you know, I was fairly risk averse about it because I was making enough money to quit by the first book, really. But I sort of didn't really know, you know, how it was going to go. So I gave it 3 books to feel like I had sort of established myself. So yeah, that is how that went. And yes, that was 5 years ago now. So I will probably never go back.
Thank you. I have another question. It's how do you come up with the titles for your books?
Well, some of them, so Just Another Missing Person, I always had that title from the very beginning. And I find often it's that, or I need to completely brainstorm right until the 11th hour with my publisher. And Wrong Place, Wrong Time took forever because it's not a book you can sum up in a sentence, really. It was the working title was Deja Vu for ages. I also called it Day Zero and The Day Before. And we liked The Day Before, actually, but I then had the book before Wrong Place, Wrong Time was called That Night, and we didn't want people to think The Day Before was like some sort of prequel. So yeah, it took a lot of brainstorming to get Wrong Place, Wrong Time, because we wanted to get across that it's a crime thriller, but it has a time element. So yeah, some of them are brainstorming with publishers, some of them come from my head, but yeah, not I find if I don't have a title when I deliver, it's going to be hard to find one for some reason.
And to come up with a title, is it something you ultimately have the final say, or is it something the publisher does?
I mean, we work together, so I think if I hated a title, they would listen to me, but I also know they know how to market books more than I do, and they know, you know, a book with a hugely long title or something might not sell or might not look good on a jacket or whatever. So yeah, I sort of do listen to them.
I have another question from Christy. What do you find to be the most difficult and the most exciting part of the writing process?
The most difficult is if I haven't had an idea by the time I need one, because I hate that, because then I have to start casting around for ideas, and I find they don't come in very easy circumstances. I much prefer it if I've just had an idea a few months in advance. The most exciting for me is actually the draft before I deliver, because everything has come together and I get to work on the prose and the character, which is actually what I really like to do, a lot more than the plot. So that is, and I'm, you know, within touching distance of sending it off and sort of hearing what people think. So that is, yeah, that's the part I like the most, when it's kind of all working and it's not scary anymore.
We have another question. Now that you're a mother, would you have written the story any differently?
I think I would have had Jen savor the time when he was young more, because I now see that the phases just pass so quickly, and then that version of your child is kind of gone forever. And I think, you know, the first thing she would have done when he's 3 is just pick him up and hold him. I think that's what all mothers would have done, but I didn't really know that then. And so, you know, she was also focused on the plot and stuff. But yeah, I think I would have had her kind of mourn the passing of time more in a way, and really relish the chance to go back and visit a former version of Todd, probably.
So would you have, one of the questions we have from Morgan is about alternative endings. Would you have had any alternative endings? Did you have any when you were writing?
No, I didn't actually. I always knew, I mean, I think with a book like that, you always know there's going to be a reason for the crime, and you kind of, I would expect a happily ever after if I were reading that, and I like to write happy ever afters. So no, I kind of always knew how it would end.
Okay. And what do you think Jen, Ryan, and Todd are up to now?
I can imagine Todd is studying something very sciencey at university. I think Jen would still be a lawyer. I think Ryan actually will be quite a happy police officer rather than being kind of unfulfilled.
Okay. I have another question from Christopher. Have you ever started a book that you didn't find worthwhile to finish?
Only once, actually, and I hadn't started it, but I had done a full synopsis. It's quite funny because I put this idea into Wrong Place, Wrong Time, but the idea was a woman can't get her baby to sleep, so she puts the baby in the back of the car in the middle of the night, and another woman who needs a car and is running away from something takes the car with the baby in the back. And that was the conceit of this novel. And halfway through, I was going to have her notice something in the car and that made her keep the baby. But I couldn't get it to work because I didn't really think a reasonable person in any of those situations would ever do that. First of all, steal a car, really. And second of all, keep it even though there's a baby in the back. And so I labored over the plot, but it was just one of those square peg round hole kind of things where I just couldn't get it to work in a credible way. And then I had a different idea that I then wrote. So that's the only time I've ever done it. But now, of course, I worry it will happen with every book.
What I guess as for Wrong Place, Wrong Time, what's like the message you wanted to give to your readers? Was there something you wanted us to take with us and learn from the story?
Yeah, I think possibly that as a woman or a parent, you feel very guilty for the way that you've parented, but you needn't, I think. And that's why ultimately I redeemed Jen. I think it would have been easy to have her have caused the crime in some way, but I really felt very strongly that although she thought that, I wanted it not to be the case, because I think everybody feels guilty about the way that they parent. But I sort of wanted to get the message across that people, if you've tried your best, that's kind of enough.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So are there any more questions? I know it's like 8:30 over in England, so I really do appreciate you chatting with us.
Oh, thanks.
So when do you think we'll get your next book? When do you think it'll be released?
So my next one is out on Tuesday. It's called Just Another Missing Person. So it's out in hardback on Tuesday. And then the one I've just delivered will probably be next August.
Okay. All right. Well, wait just a couple other seconds for any other questions, but if not, we might just wrap it up. Oh, we got another one from Christopher. Do you anticipate having a book series with recurring main characters?
No, not at the moment. I feel like I haven't really wanted to do that yet. One of my favorite parts of writing is discovering my new characters every year. So no, not yet. Never say never, but I do really like writing standalones.
Yeah. And I guess I could definitely see a series out of Wrong Place, Wrong Time.
I can. Yeah, I can. But as a writer, I like to do something different every year, really. I've got this idea for my next, and my immediate thought was, how can I make this not what other writers would do with this idea?
Mm-hmm. What's sort of the feedback you've been getting from your peers on this book? I know Lisa Jewell, she calls it one of the best books she's ever read. So that must feel pretty good.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's been a complete privilege to publish that book with everything that happened with it. It's wild. Some of the absolute icons of the genre have quoted on it. So yeah, I just feel very privileged, really.
Yeah. Well, I think you have such a bright career ahead of you, and we look forward to all your next books. So if there's no more questions, I think we might just end it just a little bit early. So I want to thank you, Gillian, for being
Thank
here.
you.
I want to thank the Friends of the Point of Beach Branch Library for hosting this, for giving us the access to the Zoom, and for setting up this event. So it is recorded. And from Christopher, he says, thanks very much for taking the time to do this. Much appreciated. So we look forward to reading your next book and discussing it at our book club. So thank you so much, Gillian.
Thank you. You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Have a good night.
Bye. Bye.